This week we had this story go up. Shooters MP Rick Mazza fails in last-ditch bid to delay WA voluntary euthanasia laws. Now, if you haven't been following this entire issue from the very start of its long, slow and painful life, then let's catch up. Late last year, the WA Labor government flagged its intention to introduce into Parliament a bill that would give terminally ill people access to voluntary assisted dying or euthanasia. Now, this was a pretty big deal because they're only the second state in the country to do that after Victoria in 2017. The WA government appointed a panel of experts to consult with industry, with the public and with individuals on what that draft bill should look like. But even back then, they were pretty confident that whatever form the bill took, they'd have support. Cut to this year and that expert panel handed down its draft bill, which looks like this. Voluntary assisted dying would only be available to a person who is over the age of 18, who has a disease that's causing intolerable suffering, who's likely to die within 6 months or 12 months for certain other conditions, who's an Australian citizen and who's been a resident of WA for at least a year. To access euthanasia, the patient would have to submit 3 requests to die, 2 verbal and 1 written, and all those requests would have to be signed off by 2 doctors who are independent of one another. A patient could then administer the lethal drug themselves, or they could get a medical or nursing practitioner to do that for them. A special watchdog would be created to ensure all the laws around this are being followed, and new criminal offences would be created to stop people from being coerced. Now that the bill was drafted, the real work began. And by real work, I mean politicians talking to each other. You know, these guys love talking, real talkers, real chatterboxes, blabbermouths, love a debate. You know, these guys love talking. They absolutely love a debate, absolute master debate. Yeah, so now that the bill was introduced into the lower house, the ensuing debate lasted more than 70 hours in total, including one marathon 20-hour-long debate that happened in early September. It was passed in the lower house eventually, and that's where the government has quite a comfortable majority as far as numbers go. But then it was sent to the upper house where the numbers are much tighter and the process somehow could be even longer. So this is where the story we mentioned earlier comes in. A Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party member named Rick Mazza has asked that an inquiry be held into the bill again, saying that the original consultation process didn't involve the Indigenous communities of WA enough. Now, many of the bill supporters saw that as just another sort of delaying tactic, and Mr Mazza's request was rejected. So the debate is still going on in the upper house now, and the government hopes that a final vote on it will happen before the end of the year, but as to whether that happens, it's still uncertain. It's important to note too that this issue is something that politicians from both sides of politics are voting on as a matter of conscience. There are quite high-profile politicians from both Liberal and Labor who are both for and against the bill. So what happens next? Well, if it's voted through in the upper house, the bill will be ascended into an Act of Parliament and all the things it says it will do will eventually happen. If the upper house votes it down and the 2 houses are basically locked in a stalemate, something called a Conference of Managers is what will happen, where 2 representatives from either house meet and try and settle the stalemate. If it can't be settled, then the bill fails. The process of lawmaking is quite tricky. Ideas become expert panels, which become draft bills, which become debates, which eventually are supposed to become laws. But in this case, these politicians are going to be deciding on something that still effectively hinges on a moral question, and that's after everything's gone through the mangle of the legislative process. And that question is this: do terminally ill people deserve the right to die?